So I'm sitting here picking blackberries and I started thinking about things. I started thinking about how come we crave sugar as humans, why things like blackberry bushes have thorns on them, what food is in our marketplace, uh, the difference between eating food that is conscious right from the plant or buying from stores. And so I'm going to talk about some of these things. Probably forget about most of what I just thought about before the end of this. But let's start with, why do we crave sugar? So check this out. There's like trails and trails of these blackberry bushes out here right next to that, which I hope is just a light. I think it's just a light, not a tower of some sort. But anyways, if you were to imagine, so right now it's fall. Some of the leaves are starting to fall off the trees. So this is right before wintertime in this area. There's going to be a lot of snow here in a little bit, in a couple months. So in fall, a lot of the fruit is blooming. And as animals, we would come up to this fruit in the fall time. And the animals that were most attracted to the sugar in these berries would eat the most berries because they would have the highest amount of craving for sugar. When sugar enters the bloodstream, the body balances itself out, and it does that by releasing insulin. And insulin gathers all the sugar and turns the sugar into fat. Now these animals that ate the most amount of berries because they craved the most amount of sugar right before the wintertime had the most amount of fat going into wintertime, which then meant what? That they had a higher probability of surviving the winter, because then you can use those fat stores when you're fasting during winter because there's not a lot of food. And also when your body stores fat, it stores stem cells with them. But that's another subject of the benefit of fasting. But having the fat stores allows you to survive the winter. So if you were an animal that didn't crave these little buckets of sugar goodness, then you wouldn't eat the berries, you wouldn't gain a lot of fat, and you would most likely die in the wintertime. So we are a result of this evolutionary process, evolutionary speaking, because there's many different ways and perspectives to look at this. We are a result of this evolutionary process, and so now we are left with bodies, these animalistic bodies that we have crave sugar. And the problem nowadays is that all of this sugar is manipulated to taste even better than they do off this bush. Sweeter, more convenient, more colorful, and the body gets tricked. So what is an evolutionary process to keep us alive then gets taken advantage of through marketing to get our energy, right? Which is converted into currency. So it's kind of like the Matrix. We get advertised to, and our life force gets sucked away from us so that we consume what is free, and we pay money, which is energetic currency equivalent. No, it's the physical currency equivalent to our energetic currency. Anyways, so we're being taken advantage of. So the manipulation of life force energy, which comes in the form of food is humongous business. I'm going to go on an extreme tangent here, and hopefully I remember what I was just talking about, because I don't really remember right now. Food is life force energy, right? It's a combination of sunlight, earth, air, and water, the elements. That's what makes this up. These plants, combination of earth, air, water, and light, and then it all gets organized by consciousness or ether. So the etheric or morphogenic field organizes this bush into a bush. I'm going to go on another tangent on that, because why does this bush, like, I'll give you an example of why this bush is a bush, because I'm getting stabbed right now as I'm picking these. So this all was swampland. This all still is swampland, but it was converted to a city someone was just explaining to me that it used to be all swampy and they had to like put down wood, tons of wood, just to make the like huge trees cut. They just kept on stacking wood to make the streets of Mount Shasta. But this is all swampland. And how a swamp turns into a forest, McDodge explained to me once when I was at his house, because he used to live in forests for like over 10 years in the rainforest. But he was talking about how these, like what happens first, the beginning of a forest starts with things like the blackberry bush. They're all thorned up, right? And they thrive in swampy conditions. Oh! And the thorns keep the big giant animals from destroying the bush. The thorns also keep the big giant animals like deer from eating the things that are growing up inside the berry bush, so, or behind the berry bush, like trees. So without these berry bushes and the thorns, trees wouldn't have an opportunity to grow, because first there's a swamp, and then this turns swamp into nutrition and nitrogen. Yeah, I don't really understand too much about the nitrogen balance of soil, so I won't go into that concept. But it turns the swamp into this. And this starts to eat up the water from the swamp and put it into here. The little animals start eating it, but the big animals stay out. And the big animals don't have an opportunity to eat the tree seeds that end up resting in the swampy soil and start growing. So if the big animals don't destroy the trees before they become trees, then the trees have an opportunity to become trees. And so once the trees grow up, the trees start sucking up more water from the forest. And the trees are going to need these bushes to suck up the water before they exist. But once they do that, then the trees sprout, the animals are kept out, and then the trees create shade. The shade will eventually make these bushes disappear. And there's a lot of other steps in between this, but the thorns in this blackberry bush actually help the trees survive, so that this whole entire area, which was once a swampland, eventually becomes a forest. Okay, I'm gonna back up one more tangent. I think I was talking about the food supply. So the food industry, you guys should look up the book, The Fish That Ate the Whale. It's about the food industry. And you'll start to realize that, like, it's not just like farmers selling foods. That's, everybody eats. This is big business. A lot of the food companies were started by like the mafia type organizations that led to monoculture. But anyways, it's an interesting book. Food is big industry, and it's a manipulation of life force energy. So they're charging us for food, they're charging us for land. That's what they did first. They're charging us for energy. And people like Tesla who figure out ways to make this stuff free, or even just people, I think it's illegal to grow food on your land in some states. It's illegal to have solar power in some states, to live off grid in some states, to collect your own water in some states. Because the manipulation of this current is what allows the entire supply and demand debt slave system to flourish. So whenever you get a chance to eat off the bush, kind of like voting during that moment of your life to exist outside of the system and within your own sovereign, mutually beneficial current state with nature. Because this is beneficial for you. On fruits and vegetables are prebiotics. Prebiotics? I think they're actually probiotics. They're bacteria that thrive on life. So we're being sold a bunch of bacteria that thrive on death, like fermented vegetables. I'm wearing these sandals, walking through thorns. Probiotics that thrive on death are on fermented vegetables and kimchi and sauerkraut. They're decent for you, but the best things for your belly are the probiotics that thrive on life. There's a bunch of little microorganisms, and I guess I'm eating some cotton in this also. There's a bunch of microorganisms on this fruit right off the bush. So if you are lucky enough to have access to outdoor fruit and you're not living next to, say, a freeway, make sure to eat the stuff without washing it, because especially when it has that white film, if I go to the plum tree down the street, it's got this white film on it. That's all living organisms. So most people want to wipe that stuff off because they don't know what it is. Well, those are the probiotics that are thriving on a living organism, and they're better for you. They will be beneficial for you to have inside of you. I'm not saying the probiotics inside kimchi and cultured vegetables are bad for you. They just aren't as beneficial as the probiotics that thrive on life. So I can essentially sit here and eat these berries forever because they're different than the ones in the store, which are hyper sweetened. If you guys get a chance to go pick some cherries from a tree, you'll realize that they're not as sweet as the ones in the store. They're a little bit bitter. I think I'm done here. It's almost winter time, and I'm excited to experience the snow because I've lived in Los Angeles for 13 years, and we just got a place in Mount Shasta. Not sure if we're gonna stay here all winter. We might. The plan was to go to Hawaii, so we might get a place in Hawaii also. That's the plan, but Hawaii's shut down for now. So here we are, and I'm thinking about wintertime, which also brings up a whole bunch of thoughts about cycles and cycles of everything, even life, and how it's a fractal of the seasons of the earth going around the sun. And we need to also be present to the fact that the sun is going around the galaxy, and that there were a lot of cultures that tracked that with calendars that are tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of years old. And why were they tracking that? Because we use our calendars to track seasons of temperature, which is basically intensities of our light source. So if there's another light source that our solar system goes through seasonally that affects the consciousness of people on this planet in a way that explains the pyramids of Egypt, the high societies like Atlantis and Lemuria, and who are those people from 10,000 years ago? Why can't I remember this? The people that came up with the term Anunnaki. Those Sumerians, these societies that know more than we do now, a seasonal capacity of our sun going around the galaxy will explain that maybe our consciousness is affected by another source of light. Maybe it's a light that we don't really consider light or even know about. We, as in traditional education, that could affect things like how many strands of DNA we have, how our brain perceives things, how open our pineal gland is or how big our pineal gland is, even our appendix gland. Appendix organ, I mean. Yeah. So I'm going to keep on talking. There's the precession of the equinoxes, which is a 26,000, I don't even remember this. It's been years since I've even mentioned this. 26,590, I think. Or maybe 25,900. I don't know. Around 26,000 years long, where our Earth wobbles and it points to different parts of the sky, which is where our constellations are, and it's tracked in this calendar that's 26,000 years old. I want to say 25,920, but I don't remember. And you can chart the consciousness on this cycle. And so there's certain points on this where you can consider spring, fall, winter, and summer. And we would say that like Atlantis, Lemuria, 30, 40, 50,000 years ago, that was like am I going down the right tangent here? Well, I don't want to talk about things that I don't know too much about, so I'll just say that it's been many years since I even thought about this, and I'm talking about it now, but I might have some of my facts wrong. But in this wobble, we can look at human evolution and we can see different timescapes in coordination to the architecture of what was left behind in the civilizations on this planet. And like there's still just blackberries everywhere. And we can see that there's seasons of consciousness where it seems like sometimes the world is kind of like dead, consciously speaking. Like everyone's kind of asleep still. And you could say that's like the winter time of this energetic cycle. And there's other times where people are thriving. And then it falls back into the darkness again, to the winter cycle. And where we are now, so even if you look back in history, you have like the Dark Ages, you have times where like the Egyptians were thriving. That's all up for debate though, when that actually was, whether it was 3,500 years ago or 30,000 years ago. But there's many sites throughout the world that are up to 100,000 years old that had humans thriving. There's even stones that they dig up and carvings in the walls of humans existing with dinosaurs. So the narrative that we got taught is a conversation point that you could have in your mind. And the point I'm trying to make is that we're in springtime. So we're coming out of the winter time, and 2012, which is where a lot of these cyclical calendars, they're all in cycles for this reason. If you guys don't know, the Mayan calendar never ended, because the Mayan calendar is 3 gears that are put together in a very awesome way. You should look up, how does the Mayan calendar work? They're gears and they rotate. So the Mayan calendar cannot end. It just clicked over to restart in a new cycle, a new age. And there's all of these, the word age is like it's repeated throughout many different texts. And these ages represent different galactical years on all different types of scales. Sometimes they're measuring the Earth going around the sun. Sometimes they're measuring the sun going around the galaxy. Sometimes they're measuring the wobble of the Earth. But in a lot of these seasonal calendars, we have the ages ending in 2012. And then that's the beginning of the next. And so we're coming from the winter time into the spring, and that's where all of this increase of energetic consciousness comes into play. We've got kids that are being born now that remember their past lives. We've got kids that are being born that are smarter than their parents. And how does that get remedied by the government, which has an agenda to control? Vaccines and schooling remedies that. So we're in springtime now, and it's going to be awesome. So there's a lot of very, very intense changes happening, and that's what's going on right now.